So yes, good morning. I'm so glad you all joined me today to get some information about mindfulness and how it can help you with stress resilience in your caregiving journey. So for those of you who have yet to do so, would you please put your email address in the chat so that I can take attendance and also send you your post survey. And again, the post survey is completely optional. It does help us to get the feedback from you all to make sure that we are providing quality education, things that you are interested in hearing about, and give you an opportunity to give us the good, bad, and the ugly so that we can improve, or just to let us know we're on the right track. And also there's a space there for you to give suggestions for future trainings. If that's something that there's something kind of floating around your mind, you want to know a little bit about, just type it in the post survey and we can hopefully work something out to where you guys are getting what you need. So we got some more people coming in. All right. So we'll go ahead and get started about mindfulness and the benefits of it as soon as George gets in. There he is. Hey, George. He's connecting the audio. Okay. Good morning. All right. So our agenda today, we are going to touch briefly on caregiver stress syndrome. And the reason why I want to talk about that before is because I feel like sometimes when you have a list of symptoms, I guess, or traits, and you can see yourself in those traits, it'll inspire you to possibly get resources, get help. And so I think a lot of times we experience an overwhelm of stress, but we've been stewing in it for so long, we don't realize how bad it's gotten. And so my aim with talking about caregiver stress is to really just kind of bring to your foremind maybe some things that you want to address, maybe some things that you're experiencing that maybe mindfulness can be of help for. And so that's why we're going to go over caregiver stress syndrome very briefly. And then I'm going to define mindfulness for you as best as I can. And we're going to go over a couple myths about mindfulness. I think it's one of those buzzwords in positive psychology we hear a lot, and sometimes the definitions are a little different, and so and sometimes the beliefs about it are a little different. And so I think it's important to just kind of lay that groundwork so that way when I say mindfulness, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And then we're going to spend most of our time in the benefits of mindfulness practice, because that's the whole point that you hear, right? Why does it work? Why should I even attempt to do a mindfulness practice? And so we're going to talk about some of the benefits. And then I'm going to go over just the very basics of mindfulness practice. And it's a very difficult and simple thing. Again, anytime you hear me say practice, mindfulness practice, gratitude practice, that's just indicating that this is not a quick fix. This is not overnight success stories. These are practices that you can incorporate in your daily work, in your daily life, that is going to build up over time. Okay. So mindfulness isn't just taking a deep breath and then your life is fixed. We all know that's not the case. So I just want to give you the basics of that. And then also, when I send you your post survey, I do have a link to a handout that I think would be helpful for you to just explore on your own, so that it gives you some ways that you can practice mindfulness, incorporate it in an everyday practice for you. So hopefully that'll be helpful for you towards the end here. So let's go ahead and get into it. What is caregiver stress syndrome? So caregiver stress syndrome is a manifestation of physical, mental, and emotional fatigue, right? You ever been there? Most of us have. It often occurs when we prioritize the care of our loved one who's unwell, injured, disabled, over our own physical and emotional well-being. Okay, so it's kind of like a burnout situation, right? Where you've just been pouring and pouring and pouring into yourself and neglecting that replenishing in your own space. And so your nerves are spread very thin, right? And so you start to manifest these physical and emotional symptoms because of it. And so caregiver stress syndrome is strongly associated with negative health outcomes. Okay. Of course, most stress is, but I think what makes caregiver stress significantly different is it is a constant, right? You're constantly meeting the needs of another person. And so where you might have a stressful day at work, you can come home and unwind and you have your routine and your ritual, right, to replenish, or maybe you have the weekends that are free to where you can replenish. That's not necessarily the case with caregiving, right? Caregiving happens whether you're at work or you're at home, right? Whether you're at the weekend or whether you're on vacation or not, right? Caregiving doesn't stop. And so I think that's why when we talk about the adverse effects of caregiving, it is a little different than your typical stress that you would experience. So between 40 to 70% of caregivers suffer from depression. While many caregivers also have anxiety as a result of the stress associated with providing care, um, anger and irritability can also be common symptoms of caregiver stress syndrome. Okay. So chronic stress could also lead to high blood pressure, to diabetes, and a compromised immune system. So the reason I put this in here is so that you know that if we don't address our caregiver stress, it will make itself known in a very, very pungent way over time, right? And so here's some of the symptoms of caregiver stress syndrome. So, of course, this isn't an exhaustive list, and you may find yourself in some of these bullet points, and some of them may not apply to you. Maybe you're experiencing all of them. But here's a kind of a general overview of what some of the symptoms of caregiver stress syndrome might include. So, changes in your appetite and your weight, or both. And that means overeating, undereating, gaining weight, losing weight, right? Or both. I've used the example of my husband and myself were kind of different. So when he's stressed out, he eats. And when I'm stressed out, I starve, right? My stomach just closes up and I can't eat. And so you can have a shift in your appetite from what is normal for you or typical for you under extreme stress. Okay. So if you normally have a healthy appetite and then you find that you cannot stomach food, that could be a sign that you're experiencing a lot of stress. Okay. Next, feeling sad, hopeless, irritable, or helpless. Of course, we all have these emotions, right? We can have sad days, we can have irritable days, right? But I think the one I really want to zero in on is that hopelessness. That is a huge red flag as far as I'm concerned when it comes to your stress level. If you are finding it difficult to balance your workload, and you are feeling overwhelmed, inundated, and you're feeling like the situation is hopeless, it's never going to get any better. That is a huge red flag. And I would hope that you would reach out to somebody, even if it's just me, because that's when you lose hope in your situation, it's very difficult to get back on track and find solutions. Okay. So hopelessness is, to me, is just one I really wanted to zero in on. Next, distancing yourself from friends and family. Now, often in caregiving, that's just part of the deal, right? You just have to make sacrifices in your other social networks because of the demands of caregiving. But what I'm talking about is when you have no desire to be around friends and family, okay? You are preferring to isolate, okay? That's a symptom of caregiver stress syndrome. A change in your sleep patterns. Okay. So maybe you're struggling through insomnia and it's not normal for you to have those periods of insomnia. Maybe you're having a difficult time getting out of bed. Maybe staying awake is your problem, right? So anything that's going to be a variation of what is typical for you, that is when you think maybe this is a symptom of caregiver stress syndrome. Having an increased frequency of illness. Most of us know that stress can deplete our immune system quite greatly, and it increases the frequency in which we are becoming ill or under the weather. Now, of course, you also have to take in consideration, is it flu season or what, is it allergy season, those kind of things. But if you just seem to keep having back-to-back illnesses, your body is probably worn down due to stress. Next, thoughts of self-harm or harming others. Okay. So that kind of ties into that hopelessness feeling, right? This isn't going to get any better. This isn't going to change. Why bother? Okay. And so that's where those thoughts of self-harm or even possibly harming your loved one come into play. Okay. Losing interest in things that you once enjoyed, right? Maybe you enjoyed exercise and now you don't. Maybe you enjoyed having lunch with your friends and now you don't. Okay. Now, I'm not saying you don't have, this isn't the same as not having the opportunity to do these things. It's the losing the desire or the interest of things that you used to really enjoy. Okay. Whether that's playing music or doing art or, crossword puzzles, whatever it is. Okay. You don't enjoy that anymore. Okay. And then next, the emotional and physical fatigue along with irritability. And so these are just some symptoms of caregiver stress syndrome. And I also want to point out these are also very typical of signs of depression. And so you'll kind of see there's an overlap there, that caregiver stress syndrome and depression. And I think the only difference is really just the way that they're clinically diagnosed, because you can have depression, clinical depression, and not have a precipitating event like a caregiving situation that causes it. It's just about the chemicals in your brain. But the symptoms of depression and caregiver stress are very similar. And I just want to point that out because we all get depressed sometimes. I think we all feel the blues sometimes. But if it is this overwhelming sense of sadness or dread or what have you, please reach out to somebody, okay? Whether that's a care chat, whether that's a 988 suicide line, whatever it is, don't sit in those spaces alone, okay? And so the reason I share all this with you is so that way you can see how mindfulness can help combat some of these symptoms, okay? And a lot of times we need help. And so there are mindfulness-based cognitive behavioral therapies or stress reduction therapies that a professional can help you through. And so mindfulness can be done individually. It can also be done with a professional, okay? So just be mindful of that. No pun intended. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, what is mindfulness? Well, mindfulness is the basic human ability that we have to be fully present, okay, and aware of where we are and what we're doing, and not to be overly reactive or overwhelmed by what's going on around us. So I love this quote by, and I'm going to butcher his name, John Kabat-Zinn, I believe is how he pronounces his name. And he was actually a founder of mindfulness-based stress reduction techniques that a lot of therapists will use in their treatment of people who have caregiver stress syndrome or depression or what have you. And so he says mindfulness is awareness that arises through paying attention on purpose in the present moment, non-judgmentally, in the service of self-understanding and wisdom. And so what that basically means, a lot of times when we sit with our thoughts, we can be very judgmental of those thoughts, right? We can be very, they can be kind of shame inducing. And so mindfulness is being able to experience those thoughts and not judge ourselves over them, okay? Not to push what we think, quote unquote, negative thoughts down, but to just observe them with no judgment, okay? So that's kind of the goal of mindfulness. So mindfulness is something that we all naturally possess. Good morning, Shirley. And it's more readily available to us when we practice over time, okay, on a daily basis. So I'll just tell you myself, when I started mindfulness, I thought this is not going to do anything for me. I can't stand sitting and hearing my own thoughts. I just critique myself and I go over my to-do list and stuff. But I learned that that's normal in the very beginning, okay, because we're trying something new. It's going to be something different that our brain doesn't typically do naturally, as far as, not beating ourselves up, not feeding that inner critic. But it is something that over time, it becomes a lot more peaceful, right? You enjoy the space a little bit more. So whenever we bring awareness to what we're directly experiencing through our senses, or your state of mind, and our thoughts and our emotions, we're being mindful, okay? So that could even be just eating mindfully, right? Sitting down and tasting your food. How many times have you sat down to eat, or even not even sat down to eat? You just grab something on your way out the door and you just wolf it down. You don't even taste it, right? Mindfulness is just about slowing down that process and just exploring the sensation of just our everyday activities, okay? So there is growing research showing that when we train our brains to be mindful, we're actually remodeling that physical structure of our brain. So there's a lot of studies that say that it can increase the density or I'm not sure what the word is. So it can increase the gray matter in our brain, right? It can actually help to stabilize the brain structure a little bit through mindfulness. And I think that's fascinating. So mindfulness, again, is our inherent capacity to be completely in the present moment, conscious of our surroundings and actions without being excessively reactive or stressed by those external circumstances. So mindfulness is a natural trait, but it becomes more accessible through regular daily practice. The goal of mindfulness is to wake up to the inner workings of our mental, emotional, and physical processes. And the reason why I think this is important for stress reduction, it's not necessarily to get everybody in this space where they're, off in the, Tibetan mountains somewhere and, staying on 30 hours, a week or whatever. Of course, you can definitely get to that space if that's where you want to be. But it's really just about being aware. How many times are we either thinking about the future or we're reliving the past? Okay. Being in that present moment helps us to navigate our response and our reaction to things, and so that we aren't as irritable or angry or explosive. Okay. Um, so again, it's not a quick fix, but it's something that over time it's a trait that we can cultivate. So mindfulness is available to us in every moment, whether through meditation, body scans, a mindful moment practice, like taking time to pause and breathe when the phone rings instead of rushing to answer it. Of course, that would not be applicable to me. I'm a classic introvert. My phone's been on do not disturb for 3 years. So my phone doesn't ring. But, it's just, that's an example of instead of just reacting, we are responding. We take that moment, that pause to really think about how we're feeling and what we're doing. So what is meditation? Mindfulness and meditation go hand in hand. And a lot of times when we think of meditation, again, it's that cross-legged monk in, a sacred space in the forest somewhere doing meditation. That's absolutely meditation. But meditation isn't just that, okay? So meditation is exploring. It's not a fixed destination. So our head doesn't become vacuum free of thought or utterly undistracted. That's not possible. But it's a special place where each and every moment is momentous, right? That sunshine on our face, that warm blanket we're under, okay? That can all be moments of meditation and mindfulness. So when we meditate, we venture into the workings of our minds, our sensations like air blowing on our skin, or maybe a smell or fragrance wafting into the room, our emotions, like we love this, we hate this, we crave this, we loathe that, okay? Or even just random thoughts in our brain, like, what if an elephant was playing a trumpet or something like that, okay? So mindfulness meditation just asks us to suspend the judgment that we have on ourselves and our thoughts, and unleash our natural curiosity about our mind and our thoughts and that natural working of our mind. And so that allows us to approach our experience with warmth and kindness, not only for ourselves, but for other people. And I think this is especially important for people in a caregiving situation where, our mind is always chasing that next thing on our to-do list, right? We're planning that next doctor's visit, or that next grocery run, or that next pharmacy run, right? And then even if we have maybe some hard feelings about the job, right? I don't want to do this anymore. This is hard. This is gross. This is frustrating. Okay. And then we judge ourselves for that. And so mindfulness is just a way, meditating is just a way of accepting our full humanity, right? Being curious about where these thoughts are coming from, and to give us the opportunity to be kind to ourselves and not beat ourselves up so much for having just human thoughts, right? Human emotions. And over time, that makes us more gentle with other people, including the ones that we're taking care of. So let's go through some myths about mindfulness. Number one, mindfulness is just Buddhism in disguise. Okay, some people do not want to attempt mindfulness because of the fear that it is closely attached to a religious practice or spiritual practice that is different from what they practice in their own life. They think maybe that it's a way to be converted into a different religion or faith. But mindfulness is not something that's owned by Buddhism, okay? Again, it is a basic human inheritance and capacity or capability, and it's not owned by any group or religion or philosophy. It is just a capacity of the human mind, and mindfulness can be trained with practices and discipline, just like one can become a more skilled violinist through practice, or build your strength through weight training, right? So Buddhist practitioners have done deep research on the subject of mindfulness and meditation, and many Buddhist traditions offer insights, but that doesn't mean Buddhism owns mindfulness, right? Any more than we would say that Italians own pasta or Greeks own democracy. Mindfulness is a central practice in Buddhism, but the Buddha would not have claimed to have invented mindfulness. Just as Newton wouldn't have claimed to have invented gravity, right? Just kind of brought it into the mainstream, okay? Brought it to everyone's awareness. So mindfulness, both the innate human ability that we have and the practice to cultivate it, are open source, right? Anybody can access mindfulness. It doesn't mean that you have to be a Buddhist to participate in mindfulness practice. So myth number 2, meditation leads to a dull, monotonous, cult-like state of calmness and passivity, right? You think about the, just empty your mind, right? That's not really what mindfulness is. So whoever suggested that mindfulness meditation requires you to manage or police your thoughts and also get nothing done out in the world, they kind of missed the point, okay? The point of slowing down during meditation practice, not just in your life overall, but during that practice, is to allow you to see how your own mind operates. It's just a way to get to know yourself. And I am a firm believer that the way that we cultivate compassion in ourselves and others is sometimes just getting down to that basic of understanding ourselves and why we react the way we react and why do we believe what we believe and why do we do what we do. Okay. And mindfulness is just a platform to open up that invitation to do that. Okay. So we all know that there are a bunch of different types of minds, right? You can be shy, outgoing, fast moving, slow going, ambitious, reflective. And of course, within each mind is a vast array of emotions: sad, happy, ecstatic, and every shade in between. And a healthy mind and a healthy community is going to be diverse, and they're going to be able to draw on all of those parts to the full extent. Okay. So meditation is one means to enable that fundamental healthiness of mind. So it doesn't dull us into the sameness. Okay. It's not trying to pull everybody into this, mindless clones of one another. Mindfulness practice allows you to be yourself more freely and more uniquely. Okay. Because you get to know yourself and you get to accept yourself. Okay. And I think that self-acceptance is a great combat to shame. And shame does not live in my space, okay? Because shame only leads to more heartache, more judgment, and ultimately more burnout, I believe. So mindfulness myth number 3, mindfulness fixes something that is wrong with you. I'm really sad that this is a myth that people have, not just in mindfulness in and of itself, but that we feel like there's something wrong with us. Because I just feel like every human being, of course, is going to have differences and things that they want to change or improve. But that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you, fundamentally wrong with you, okay? But a lot of times when people start a mindfulness practice and it doesn't go the way that they thought it would go because of their impressions of maybe what they've seen in media or movies or whatever, they'll say things like, well, what's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? I'm just bad at this, right? My mind is scattered. I can't think straight. Everyone else seems to be doing it, but I can't, right? And so then you just end up giving up. But if you've tried anything new, right, like playing the guitar, or maybe you're a first-time parent, or snowboarding, whatever, you'll have thoughts like that run through your head, right? Anytime you try something new, and often we'll repeatedly kind of tell ourselves that we're not good at it, we're not cut out for it, and we quit. Okay. The practice of mindfulness, which is just being curious about what's going on in your mind, that's very freeing. We come to feel that the movement of mind is not so mysterious and that we can learn to navigate our sensations and our thoughts and our emotions more skillfully. Again, we're just learning our own patterns. We're learning our own triggers. We're learning about ourselves. And so the voice in our head is going to become less annoying because it's going to be less critical once we start to accept those thoughts and not be so judgmental of them. So all the benefits of meditation arise from experiencing our mind as more workable, right? So we can focus and guide it better, and we can also let things go. So the illustration that I have for you is more dance and less straitjacket, okay? So we don't want to restrict our mind or cut things out, okay? We just want to accept it, let it flow, be more of a dance, okay? And this isn't fixing. Again, there's nothing wrong with you. Your mind is naturally capable of mindfulness, awareness, kindness, okay, and compassion. And it's not in any need of fundamental repair. So, of course, we all stumble and stray and flail about in confusion sometimes, and sometimes more frequently than others, and that's okay. But what we need is that little bit of stability, okay, in our mind. And that's why when we have a mindfulness practice that kind of anchors us back to our breath, right? If you've ever even just watched 1 or 2 YouTube videos, they say pay attention to the breath. The goal is just that in staying that simple habit to kind of bring your thoughts back to that breath so that they're not taking over your mindfulness meditation, right? You're not thinking about what's going on tomorrow. You're not thinking about what happened yesterday. You're just focusing on that breath. And that's going to give your brain that neurological space where you're always planning or reminiscing. It kind of gives it that break, right? Because it has to stay in that present moment when you shift it back to your breath. Okay. So this is a gently repeating simple habit that mindfulness allows us to do that returns that's anchor that return back to the mind. Okay. So bit by bit, that steadiness emerges and allows a better view of what's happening in our mind and more opportunity to make choices. Okay. So we're not just beholden to the inner workings of our mind with no supervision whatsoever. Okay. We're learning to kind of train that, cultivate that trait of being able to be in control a little bit better. And so, of course, the point of returning to the breath is not that thinking itself is problematic. When you're learning to cook, you might turn up the heat too high and burn something, but that doesn't mean you're not a good cook. It just means you need to adjust the heat. Okay. And so that's really what mindfulness is. It's about just pulling your thoughts back to the present moment. Okay. Giving your brain that neurological break that it needs. Okay. So what are the benefits of mindfulness? So I have 5 listed here. There are there's a lot more, but these are just the 5 that I think would be probably most applicable to a caregiving situation. So number 1, anxiety and depression may decrease after meditation training. So they've done tons of studies on meditation, especially during the positive psychology movement I think it started back in the 80s is when a lot of this research started coming about. So it's been decades of research where they've done these studies. And they have shown that mindfulness meditation programs like mindfulness-based stress reduction and mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, which are just kind of modes or modalities that a therapist could use with you, they can effectively reduce stress-related health problems like anxiety and depression. In fact, the effects of such programs are comparable to those of antidepressants. So there's a Journal of the American Medical Association, or JAMA, and they found that mindfulness-based cognitive therapies reduce stress rates of relapse for up to 60 weeks, making it particularly effective for patients with high levels of depression. Okay. Furthermore, this reduction in relapse risk was observed across different demographics. So whether it's your different ages, different genders, education, relationship status, it affected everyone in a positive way. Okay. Next, it could improve your immune function, meditation training. So individuals who underwent an 8-week mindfulness training program exhibited a higher count of flu antibodies compared to people who were not meditating and received the flu vaccine. So research has also discovered that both meditators and non-meditators experience an increase in positive feelings and antibody responses to immune system challenges, but the increase was significantly higher in meditators. Okay, so they were both getting the flu vaccine, but the people who meditated had more of the antibodies than those who didn't. So I thought that was really fascinating. And in another study conducted at the University of California in Los Angeles, researchers found that mindfulness-based stress reduction can improve immune function even in those with HIV. It's believed that enhanced immune system functionality could be a factor in the improvement of healing found in psoriasis treatment. And studies that incorporated mindfulness reflection during therapy saw more immune system responses to psoriasis. I thought that was really interesting too. Next, your brain may be protected from declines due to aging and stress after meditation training. So, of course, brain matter is where all of our fun stuff lives. It's all in that space up there. And that is believed to decrease in volume in age, right? So whether you have a diagnosis like dementia or Alzheimer's, you don't have to have those for your brain volume to kind of decrease over age. But a study by Dr. Eileen Louders at the UCLA School of Medicine showed that the brains of long-term mindfulness practitioners are protected from gray matter atrophy more than non-practitioners. A 2017 study looking at the brain function in healthy older adults suggests meditation may increase attention. And a systemic review of review of research to date suggests that mindfulness may mitigate cognitive decline, perhaps due to its effects on memory, attention, processing, and executive functioning. And new research finds that mindfulness instruction may lessen cognitive decline due to mental and emotional stress. Okay, so again, there's a lot of physical benefits to meditating. Number 4, mental clarity and focus improve after meditation training. So mental clarity and focus improve according to a recent meta-analysis of 18 different studies that did 8-week-based mindfulness training or stress reduction. And they found that mindfulness-based programs can support components of cognition. So that includes short-term and autobiographical memory, cognitive flexibility, self-awareness. And so that will help you to develop awareness of negative thought patterns in order to develop new ways of thinking and responding to experiences. So having that mental clarity, focus improving can actually help you have more of an open mind and be more open to changing behaviors that you have in yourself, patterns of behaviors that you maybe are hindering your growth. And then finally, meditation can improve sleep and your mood. So of course, studies show that people who have insomnia, who participate in mindfulness training, find it easier to fall asleep and stay asleep. And of course, that it will improve your mood. If you guys have ever missed out on sleep, which I'm sure most of us have, you realize it's really hard to stay sunny side up the next day. And so meditation just overall has a lot of benefits, not only for your brain and your cognition and your mental awareness, but also just anxiety, depression, sleep patterns, okay? Again, over time. So I don't want you to leave this training today, do a meditation and say, well, Jenny, it didn't fix me. I'm still sleepy. I'm still cranky. I'm still depressed, okay? Of course you are, babe. You have to do it for a while, okay? And sometimes you need to get that professional support in order to do it well, okay? So mindfulness meditation can also help with burnout, addiction, and suicidality. So a review of 23 studies looking at the effects of mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR, on employees found that 8 weeks of mindfulness training reduced stress, psychological distress, depression, anxiety, emotional exhaustion, occupational stress, and increased self-compassion, relaxation, sleep quality, and a feeling of personal accomplishment. And I think that's very important to know as caregivers because it's very easy to be burned out. It's probably par for the course for all of us at some point have felt burnt out. And so meditation can kind of help stave that off a little bit, okay? Next, addiction. So mindfulness-based interventions might be helpful in decreasing cravings of substance and substance misuse, according to reviews of 34 randomized controlled trials, okay? So research suggests that mindfulness may be particularly effective in increasing a person's awareness of stress, of despair, anger, loneliness, and cravings that could often trigger relapse. Now, I'm not suggesting that we are all experiencing addiction, but I do know that addiction comes about when we have coping mechanisms that may or may not be super healthy for us. And so it's just good to be mindful that if you are having to use, maybe wine every night or whatever it is that whatever you're using, whatever substance you're using to help you cope throughout the day, in and of itself isn't bad, but it can very quickly go into an addiction space if you're using it to cope with depression, stress, despair, okay? So maybe instead of turning to that third or fourth glass of wine, you can turn to some of these stress reduction mindfulness techniques, okay? And kind of avoid that slippery slope of addiction. And then next, suicide. So an examination of a handful of available studies on the impacts of mindfulness-based interventions on suicidal behavior found that mindfulness instruction may be particularly useful for helping people cope with stress and difficulties with problem solving. So it can also improve focused attention and decrease suicidal thoughts. And those are all known risks for suicide attempts, okay? So again, it's about being gentle with yourself, being aware of your thoughts and your triggers, right? Making sense of your situation a little bit better, being able to accept what's going on a little bit better. And that can all help you kind of stay out of that hopelessness space that we talked about earlier, where you're just feeling like this is the way it is. It's never going to end. It's never going to improve. Okay. So that's just some things that mindfulness can also help you with. And so what are the basics of mindfulness or meditation? The mindfulness practice or mindfulness can help, setting aside some time. Okay, we cannot do this while we're distracted. We cannot do this while we're watching TV. We cannot do this while we're doing dishes or doing laundry. Okay, of course, you can be mindful in those moments, right? Being aware of the sensations and things like that. But if you're talking about meditation, you're probably going to want to have a set aside time to do so. Okay, so mindfulness helps us to put some space between ourselves and our reactions, which is huge. If you're super stressed and you're reaching that point of burnout, your reactions can be a little less desirable. And so here's how we tune into mindfulness throughout the day. So, of course, set aside some time. We don't need a meditation cushion or a bench or any sort of special equipment to access the mindfulness skill, but we do need to set aside some time and space. Okay. Next, observe the present moment as it is. So the aim of mindfulness is not quieting the mind or attempting to achieve a state of eternal calm, because you'll get real frustrated real fast if you think that's the goal. The goal is simple. We're aiming to pay attention to the present moment without judging ourselves. Okay? Easier said than done, we know. But we got to let our judgment roll by, and that's the next step in our basics. When we notice judgments arise during our practice, we can make a mental note of them and let them pass. Okay. So, like an example would be if I'm meditating and out of the blue, I start thinking about, maybe my 8th grade boyfriend. Okay. I don't have to sit there and judge myself for being so cringy in the 8th grade. I can say, okay, well, that's a thought and just let it pass by. Okay. Next, we want to return to observing the present moment as it is. Our minds often get carried away in thought, and that's why mindfulness is a practice of returning again and again to the present moment. Remember, we talked earlier about that anchor of our breath, okay? Something, some sensation, some physical sensation in the present that anchors you into this present moment in time, okay? And next, be kind to our wandering mind, okay? Our minds are prone to wander, okay? We're just naturally curious beings. And so our minds are always thinking, what's this? What's this? What about that? How about this? Remember this, right? We're trying to analyze our surrounding as much as we can. And we have to be kind to our mind, okay? Especially in the very beginning when it's not going to be so easy to kind of rein it in. I did hear an illustration about mindfulness where this man was saying, if you have a new puppy in your home and you're potty training the puppy and the puppy ends up, piddling on the floor, you don't shame the dog and you don't think the dog's doing something outside of what it's meant to do because it's a puppy. You say, well, you're learning, right? You're accepting that that's where that puppy is and you're training it to do something different. The same with your brain. We don't want to be harsh to our minds or shame ourselves when we have those wandering minds. It's just part of it, okay? And over time, it will become less meandering, okay? So we don't judge ourselves for whatever thoughts crop up. We just practice to recognize that when our mind has wandered off and we gently bring it back, okay? So that is the practice. It's often been said that it is very simple, but it is not necessarily very easy, okay? The work is to just keep doing it, okay? And again, I will send you a link that gives you some great starting exercises that you can do on your own that you don't have to perform in front of everybody right now on the Zoom. Okay, I'll send that to you later. So that's the information that I have for you on mindfulness practice today. If you would like my sources, I can always send those to you so that you can look at the information yourself. And I'll go ahead and stop sharing. And I will pause the recording so that we can have some space to have a conversation without it being recorded.